Okay, is everyone ready to get started? We will begin our meeting with a moment of silence, after which we will call the meeting to order and we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. And I don't have would somebody like to volunteer to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Dr. Lesser would love to? Okay, we'll start with the moment of silence and we'll remain standing and we'll go from there. Thank you. Okay, we'll call the meeting to order, and Dr. Lesser.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, you may be seated. Thank you, Dr. Lesser. I wanted to also mention welcome to Representative Jennifer Pollock. She's here in the room. Thank you for being here with us. Thank you so much. We're very happy to have you. Okay, we're going to begin by going through and making a motion on the minutes from our last meeting, May 28th. I understand Ms. Richardson was not here, but the rest of us will be able to vote on this. Is that right, Mrs. Richardson? Okay, can I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion for the minutes of the regular meeting held May 28th, 2019.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. From there, we'll go on to our personnel requests, and that would be Dr. Holmes.
Madam President, members of the board, we're asking your approval this evening of the certificated and classified personnel requests, including the addendum.
Do I hear a motion for that?
I move the approval of the certificated classified personnel request.
Any discussion?
Yes, I would like to have discussion regarding that. It was not my understanding that the superintendent will be talking to us about those positions in executive session.
So we'll be able to talk high level with the positions, but not the individuals, because that's not allowed in executive session. So if there's questions about individuals, we'll have to be able to do it in an open meeting or be noticed for closed session.
So are you saying like at this time we need to have, if there's some discussion, it has to be about high level and how would we construct that?
So for instance, I'll use it for instance, and I'm going to pick on Dr. Holmes. So for instance, that Dr. Holmes is on there and you want to have a specific dialogue about his position and about his pay, you can either A, notice him to be in executive session, so he has 24 hours notice and we can talk about that position, specifically about that person, or we can talk at high level around the entire organization.
Okay, so how do we proceed speaking high level around the entire organization?
You can pull it for that specific, if you want to pull that specific addendum, the board would have to make a motion to amend their motion, and then you would have to pull that specific addendum to then be able to talk about the specific details in that.
And Dr. Conley, could that be could the high-level discussion be in executive session? As long as it wasn't about specific names and positions?
Okay. This is where I'm going to tell you I'm not every particular legal. That's why we have legal counsel. So I'm going to rely upon my team. Yes.
So with that, I need to ask, we've made the motion, now we've had the discussion.
Was our motion to approve the personnel request and the personnel request addendum, does that include the compensation for the executive team? Yes. So if we want to approve the other two without the compensation for the
May pull that one and put it on an action item.
That would defer it then until the next meeting, correct?
Or you can just move it as an action item later on in this agenda, so you would be able to hold that action item post the executive session.
I hear a motion.
I'll try and amend it then. I move that we approve the certificated and classified personnel request. However, we're pulling from that the executive team additional compensation item.
All in favor?
And what was the piece I need to add?
And move to action.
And move to action.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that completed it. There's a recognition of new hires with that motion.
There is, Madam President, member of the boards, with your approval of the personnel request this evening, you approve the appointment of several new administrators to Mesa Public Schools. So I'm going to read the name of the first one, and I'm going to make my way down to the podium. And if Ms. Tanya Loftus can join me at the podium. Stand right here. You have to stand on the star. I know, you have. So Tanya is currently an assistant principal at Apache Junction High School. She earned her bachelor's degree from Arizona State University and her master's degree from the University of Phoenix. We look forward to having Tanya join the Skyline High team as their next assistant principal. So I'm going to have you turn around. I'm going to find our, I think Tim, are you ready to take a picture? There he is.
He already made me look amazing.
Okay,
earlier.
well, yes, good. Would you like to say a few words?
I would like to thank my husband Darren, who's here. I'm gonna cry. I cry all the time. And I'm so excited to join the Mesa Public Schools team. I have been a part of the Leadership Academy that has been going on over the last 2 weeks, and how welcoming the district is just amazes me. Coming from a very small district into a much, much larger district, it still feels like a small town family. So kudos to you and your leadership team and the board for making Mesa feel so welcoming and home. Thank you so much.
Would you like to introduce, is he here with you?
He is, but he likes it back there.
Okay. The family affair, thank you.
Thank you, welcome. You really enjoy Skyline. We love Skyline. Oh, Tom is awesome. I know their staff's great. You'll love it.
Okay, so wait, on our personnel papers, it says she's going to Dobson.
Yep, we just got that. Well, that is a,
Sorry,
It's
you
inaccurate.
can't go to Skyline.
Wrong colors.
But your color will work well at Dobson. It's fine. You'll be fine.
That's awesome.
Do we need to amend it, or it's fine?
it's fine because you have voted to approve her appointment as an assistant principal. So her specific assignment is one that we can change.
She is now a district employee. There we go.
Way to go.
Okay, our next new assistant principal is Brady Pond for Westwood High School. Brady, please join me. Yay! So I'll have you stand at the start. This is the summertime we have a different feel of our meetings. So go ahead and we'll introduce the board in just a moment. So Brady is currently a Spanish teacher and assistant to the athletic director in Peoria. He earned his bachelor's degree from Utah State and his master's degree from ASU. Congratulations to Brady, our next assistant principal at Westwood High School. All right, so turn around. There's. Okay, you want to say a few words?
Yeah, I will echo what she said. I've been a part of the Leadership Academy for the past week or so, and it's been incredible to see everybody so welcoming, and I'm excited to be part of Mesa Public Schools, and especially excited to be at Westwood, where they have a really strong team, and it's been really exciting. I want to thank my family. Without them, it's what I do. It's exactly why I'm here. My wife Virginia, my 3 kids. They'll be the noisiest ones in the room, but they have a lot of energy, and it's exactly why we're here as educators, is to watch these young people grow up and become productive members of society. Just grateful for the opportunity.
Come on up, we'll have a picture with you.
Welcome.
Vinny, you can tell him how exciting Westwood will be, can't you? Oh, yeah, and Stephen.
Our next recognition is for our new principal at Lindbergh Elementary, Eric Hedrick. Please join me. Eric is currently an assistant principal at Desert Canyon Elementary School. He earned his bachelor's degree from Montana State and master's degree from ASU and NAU. Congratulations to Eric on his appointment as the next principal at Lindbergh Elementary School.
Yes, Madam President, President, governing board members, and Dr. Conley, thank you for this opportunity. Hello, Mesa. I'm very, very, very proud to be here. Just briefly, I just want to say hi, Mom, and thank you to my mom for all her support. Quickly, I want to thank two of my two teachers that inspired me to be a better educator, Mr. K and Mrs. Solmonson, and two leaders that I've had in my life, Mrs. Kristen Kinghorn and Mrs. Amy Uchaz. Thank you for the inspiration. And most importantly, hello, and thank you to Lindbergh. I'm really excited to join you guys and looking forward. There's going to be some wonderful things happening this year, and I can't wait to get started. So thank you. Yes, I have my wonderful girlfriend right here.
So it's picture time. This is the longest title that we'll have tonight. Coordinator of Psychological Services and Special Education, Mr. Richard Dwyer. Please join me. Rick is currently a school psychologist at Arcadia High School. He earned his bachelor's degree from the University of Arizona and master's degree from NAU and the United States International University. Rick has significant experience as a school psychologist, and we welcome to Mesa as the next coordinator of psychological services. Congratulations.
Hello, Rick Dwyer. I'm a school psychologist, been doing this for many years. Board, thank you so much for this opportunity. I welcome the change and the next coming weeks and months about doing something different in my career. I've been a school psychologist for 23 years, mostly with the Scottsdale School District. I recognize many new faces and old faces that have come over from there. So this is certainly an exciting time for me to try something new. Thank you so much. I do. I have my wife, Sonia, and I apologize to my son, Jackson. I promised he wouldn't have to do anything except sit there and look beautiful, but come on down. Let's get a photo.
You can get him ice cream on the way home. That's how you make that better. Dairy Queen, that's how it works.
Thank you, and welcome to the Mesa family. We're so happy to have each and every one of you. You know, we love Scottsdale School District because we have gotten some really great people from there, and they may not like us too much, but we have enjoyed the people that have come from Scottsdale. So welcome. We hope you feel at home here. We'll do our very best to help you all feel welcome here at Mesa. It's a great school district you will enjoy. So thank you. We will move on to our next item of the consent agenda. And I'll read this briefly. All items listed will be considered as a group and will be approved with one motion. There will not be separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered as a separate item. Do I hear a motion?
I just had one question. It was clarified some on the questions that were forwarded and returned to us earlier before the meeting. But on item F, the contract increase for AP and PSAT testing, is that because, and I know that families pay for that testing unless they take the PSAT as sophomores or juniors at school, but is this contract increase then because we're getting more kids to take the PSAT? Is this, some of this money is repaid by the families that were I'm just curious to know how much of this is not paid back, how much of it is. I didn't see that part answered in our questionnaire.
I'm going to defer to Dr. Forlis.
Madam President, members of the board, the question around the increase, it's the increase in the contract. We have more kids taking the AP exam, so we need to increase our contract. We do offer an opportunity, school by school, where kids can submit for a fee waiver or a partial fee waiver depending upon need. And our schools are great to be able to work student by student to make sure that they take care of them. But we do have more students taking AP.
So this isn't necessarily something that's being paid back and we have more taking it, it's
We have more kids taking the test.
we're paying for.
That we are paying for, yes. There's a larger need for support.
Thank you.
Other questions or discussion?
Yeah, I have a further question on subject E. I got my answer to my question, but I'm wondering about the multiple vendor contracts. Is this customary practice amongst school districts?
Yes, ma'am.
So we often can't completely anticipate all of, that we're going to use one vendor. In this particular case, you have multiple schools using multiple systems, but it's really one contract. So it's very common, not only for us to award multiple, but even cooperative contracts often have multiple vendors associated in one contract because there's more than one person that can provide those services. So it's very, very common, yes.
Thanks a bunch. I'm just learning. Thanks.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
I move for approval of the consent agenda.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay, so then we'll go to the superintendent report. Dr. Conley.
Thank you, Madam President, Clerk Sears, members of the board. It's my pleasure to provide the June 11th superintendent report. Love this picture. They're so excited to have completed what is such an important journey of their educational career and on to the next. Interesting enough, just returned from the Arizona School Administrators Conference and was really learning that the data around our postgraduate attendance, and that Arizona continues to lag around our graduates going into some type of certificate or postgraduate work. And so just how incredibly important the partnerships are with our universities, with our community colleges, and with our industry certificate providers. So continue to be excited for the work we're doing there. So a fun fact is that our class of 2019 was offered over $102 million worth in scholarships, and that's an increase of over $10 million from the previous year. So congratulations to our graduates. Our promise is that every student is known by name, served by strength and need, and graduates ready for college, career, and community. Summer break can be a very challenging time for families that are facing our food insecurity. And to combat this issue, 47 locations in the district are serving free breakfast and lunch to children under 18. The federally funded summer meal program is provided by our amazing food and nutrition department. And if you're interested, adults can go as well, can eat breakfast for $1.50 and lunch for $4. So please be part of that. It's just a great opportunity. We also are opening some of our libraries in those same schools. So excited about not only are they getting fed, they also have the books in hand for literacy. Our vision, unprecedented excellence in education. All across the district, students are participating in a number of enrichment learning opportunities. Here are 4th to 6th grade students in the Engineering Innovators Mission Microgravity class, led by Red Mountain High engineering teachers Shane Bicott and Adam Middleton. In the class, students learn the physics and engineering challenges associated with creating a microgravity environment. They design, build, and test their own satellite launching system in a mock microgravity environment. This class was inspired by teachers Bicott and Middleton's experience after attending the NASA Microgravity University for Educators at the Johnson Space Center in 2018. It's great to bring back their expertise. Our 2023 student outcomes and goals And tonight we're going to highlight a lot of these, but in particular just continue to be proud of the work that we're doing as a team around the goal that all students are socially and emotionally strong, prepared, and supported. Our collective commitments, if you remember, we drafted these last June, so it has been a year. And I look forward to our retreat on June the 25th as we'll be able to review these a little bit more. The framework for being able to reach our 2023 goals is our professional learning communities and the three big ideas. And the first big idea, focus on learning. We're in our second week of Leadership Academy at Mesa Public Schools. School and department leaders have been immersed in professional learning to prepare for a successful new year. Sessions have covered topics including risk management, which there was some gruesome, disgusting pictures if anyone wants to see what can happen, technology tips, communication, and professional learning communities. In the Threat and Risk Assessment and Crisis Response System course, which our leaders are pictured here, our leaders learned about the revisions to the district's threat, risk, and crisis response plan, including the implementation of site and district care teams. Interesting to see that as we continue to look at our safety of our schools, the threat and the risk assessment have been updated and are being modeled after the Safe Schools work, and extremely encouraged by the work that the Arizona Department of Education is doing around setting up safe schools and committees around that to see what we can do across the state. Our second big idea is collaborative teams, and we continue to be extremely grateful for our community partners. On May 29th, the district crisis team participated in training with the Mesa Police and Fire and Medical. We experienced a virtual crisis scenario involving a catastrophic fire at a district location, complete with mock 911 and radio recordings. The team learned what PD and fire would do in the scenario. District leaders from food and nutrition, transportation, operations, security, and other departments shared what their procedures would be in the scenario. This training concluded with a tour of Mesa Fire and Medical Incidents Command truck, and it was just an excellent opportunity to be able to collaborate with the agencies and ensure that we continue to review and improve our safety procedures. Our next picture, focusing on results, is with Skyline High Automotive Welding and Computer-Aided Design and Drafting. The students recently had the opportunity to give back to the Mesa Police Department. For a service project, students in Kathy Wooten's CAD class designed a kennel for a canine officer, Robbie, and students from Chip Slate's Auto and Welding Clubs built the structure. The Mesa police officers were thankful and impressed with the quality of the project, and Robbie definitely appears to be just as grateful. Our 4 guiding questions to the work that we do and that has guided our our leader learning, and really focusing on question number 1 this year of what we want our students to know, which has jump-started our strategic planning. And so where are we with strategic planning? Strategic planning was really based on that whole idea of getting our voices of the community at the table to talk about the learning outcomes for our children. And I'll be providing a strategic planning process overview of where we are a little bit later. As always, thank you for your continued support and as you continue to protect and promote this amazing district.
Dr. Conley, would members of the board like to review some of the things that they did in the last 2 weeks? If it's a vacation, that's okay too. But we like to spend this time asking board members if there's something that they'd like to share that they experienced in the district between the last board meeting, just because it's kind of nice to hear what goes on and what we do besides have this meeting every couple of weeks. So would anyone like to start? And we realize it's vacation time, so we may not have a whole lot that's going on the last 2 weeks, so keep that in mind.
I left. I'd like to say I toured schools in New Zealand, but I didn't.
We're all just really jealous that you were in New Zealand.
We crisscrossed everywhere, and we're home, and I'm still adjusting to the time change. So, Marcy asked if we took our children, and our 2 that came with us. Tell everyone we took our 2 favorites. So
Well, obviously.
clearly not it, but but that's their story and they're sticking to it.
I did have some educational experiences, but they were not here in Arizona. I got to see my son-in-law get his PhD in physics at Harvard, and that was a very exciting graduation ceremonial weekend. And I also got to observe my daughter, who is a Red Mountain graduate, teach her history class in the Chicago Public Schools. So that was a proud mom moment. But I am starting to attack the books that I've stacked in my office that people have given me throughout this year, and reading and planning for fall activities is what my summer will be.
Congratulations, Marcy. That's awesome.
Well, I've had an opportunity to engage with a lot of students from our school district and summer programs, as well as so I've had some opportunities to see what AVID camps look like and what that enrichment looks like on various campuses. Spent some time on the Polytechnic campus and just watching the rollout of that. Have had some time with Keno Junior High students as they continue to roll in various programs. And one unique experience, and as I was watching the Mesa PD and what we're doing with them, there is also a junior high academy that this upcoming week that I'll be speaking at, but I've been able to actually do a lot of the screenings for the students from our district that will be selected for that program, and that was a lot of fun, especially reading the essays and what students aspire to be and what they think salaries really are. And sometimes it's really funny to say somebody, for a student, to put, well, when I get my $1 million, when I become whatever they want to become, and then show the budget. It was really a good time to be had, and I'm very excited to actually see our students engage in so many activities during the summer.
I relaxed.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, I attended the strategic planning meeting that we had last week. I had to stop and think. It all runs together sometimes. Dr. Conley showed a slide of a picture of us all working there. It's been a very interesting process that I've had the pleasure of being a part of. It's been thoroughly informative. It also is exciting to see what our district is doing to pull information from all aspects of our community. Our students, I notice everybody is very interested in listening to what our students have to say. Students do have a voice in this process. And I know in the last piece of the meeting on that day, we were pulling together data that gave us feedback on what students wanted and what was important to them. And then together we narrowed it down to the top most important things, goals, ideas. And it's part of a bigger process to pull together all the voices that are a part of our district, and that does include the community. But importantly, sometimes the students get forgotten when we're doing a process like this, and it's nice to know in this process they are not. They're a very strong voice. So that was very good. And one other quick thing, as of today, I have a nonprofit foundation created to help support Mesa Public Schools. It's called Positive Peers, PAWSITIVE, Peers. And what it is going to be is it's going to be an organization that helps identify dogs, train them, or provide the funding for training dogs so that we can use them in Mesa Public Schools for therapy and comfort dogs, mostly comfort dogs. So we already have a few schools that have volunteered. We had to have dogs on their campus and are getting prepared, and we have people on the waiting list who would like to have dogs. So I'm very excited about that, and hopefully we'll be able to have a lot of funding, and we'll give you more news on that later, to benefit Mesa Public Schools. So thank you, everyone, and we will move on to the regular meeting session, starting with the, we've already done agenda items pretty much, so we'll skip over the agenda item review, and we'll go on to the board calendar. If we have any discussion or questions or things we'd like to point out on the calendar. Dr. Conley?
The only one I need to point out is just a change/modification to our guest speaker on Thursday, 10:30, and lunch is at 11:30 at Dobson.
Auditorium or where at Dobson?
In the auditorium, yes, ma'am.
When did you say, I'm sorry, I missed the date?
This Thursday.
Okay, I have that on my calendar.
Yes. And I'm going to have to restart my board docs.
Calendar. We'll go on then to the strategic planning, item C.
Okay, so I want to be able to continue diving into the findings of our strategic plan. And tonight we're going to spend some time looking at findings 1, 2, and 3. So again, the whole part of this is to be able to create understanding around what we're hearing from the community, understanding what we're seeing in the data, and just be able to build that narrative around our learning outcomes for our children. So I am going to rely on the team a lot just because this has been a huge team effort around the type of data that we're beginning with. And what we realized was that we have a lot of reports and we have data out there, but there's a finding that the data needs to be user-friendly and be able to tell the narrative of what we need to be looking at. And these are just a couple of the examples, and it is starting to build that beautiful mosaic of who we are as Mesa, of rich diversity, and also what are those really significant needs that we have to be able to address and take action upon. Here are our findings. The first finding, teachers are in different places in terms of the process of unpacking standards, rigor, and instruction and learning. And if you recall, this really goes back to our question number 1. What do we need our students to know? So it validates that we're doing the right work. We just need to continue working and staying steadfast. This next graphic, and I'm going to highlight Dr. Lesser. I had this crazy whiteboard, and I had all of this stuff on there, and he said, wait, you got to make it a lot more simple. And so this is his brainchild of being able to build what professional learning communities is that we focus on learning, build collaborative teams, and focus on results. And that idea that this is a journey, this isn't a one and done, that we're doing this together and it comes in phases. And so that idea of this isn't just one more thing, but asking ourselves, what do we really need to focus on? And what do we need to stop doing to be able to do this work and do it well? If you continue to look at, and I loved some feedback that I received, what in the world is MTSS? And we are so good at acronyms in the world of education, and if we don't have one, we'll make one up. So MTSS is multi-tiered system of supports. So if you really break down those words, it's multi-tiered, meaning that we are focusing on our promise that every child is known by name and served by strength and need, and that we start with the best first instruction. And if we see children that their needs are not being met, it gets into the second tier of what do our interventions look like, and then our third tier of what do some of our kids need for intensive intervention. And if you look at this, Mesa has done an amazing job of really staying ahead of that idea of climate and culture in social emotional learning. And so this year, becoming aware of 2 of the 5 competencies for all of our staff for social emotional learning, because we know we have to model those things. The second year, looking at 4 of the 5, and so you can see how this is a journey, a trajectory as we move along. This again is part of that finding 1 of what teachers are needing to be able to do in their classrooms.
A list of those competencies for SEL?
We do. Which folder would you like? We have, and we've continued to roll out. It's a model on the Castle model, so it's a national model that we've been using. And I'll let Andy. If Andy, you want to talk a little bit about that, Dr. Forlis?
Last year, Mrs. Arlinda Mann and I had the pleasure of co-chairing a task force that was focused on climate and culture. And we did a lot of research to find out what were the best practices, the most current research around how do we best support our students and what do models look like. And that task force came together and said, we are going to follow what's called the CASTLE model, and CASTLE is an acronym for a national organization. So I will talk you through those 5 competencies. They are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. So within our pay-for-performance plans at each of our schools and departments, we asked our employees to focus on 2 of those 5 competencies for this current academic year. Add 2 more the following, and then add the 5th the third year. So that's what you will see along the bottom of this chart. So depending on, there's a self-assessment that we asked our staffs to do to decide where they thought that they were and where they needed to begin their journey of social emotional learning. And I can make sure that we send that to you, and you have all the links and literature to the CASTLE competencies.
Thank you.
If you also look at this graphic and you look at the bottom around accountability, I want to highlight some work that many of the team members did that are sitting around this table in 2014. Mesa sent a team in 2014 to Harvard, and it took a look at who are we in Mesa and where are those areas that we have an opportunity to be able to move the needle in our academic achievement. And one of the major results was the need to be able to change our principal evaluation. And so when you look at accountability is oftentimes viewed as punitive, but it is actually that method for growth and fidelity. And we have a strong conviction of retaining every employee that we have, because we know the job market in education. We know that we've got to keep care of our people within Mesa Public Schools. So this idea of accountability is first aligning our work to those things that we're supposed to be doing. So the PSEL is our professional school educational leadership standards. Wow, I do have a lot of acronyms in here. I'm going to blame Pete. Can I blame Dr. Lesser? And you can't blame Dr. Lesser.
No, I did the top part and that's actually spelled out.
But the whole idea that we have structures and systems aligned to the work so that our students are engaged at a much deeper level. So that's this whole framework rolling out. Our second finding, that our students in school across the district are polite, quiet, and respectful. And we have a great video to be able to show you, which is the National Shadow a Student Day Challenge.
Finding 3 is about PLCs and collaborative teams. And the findings said that PLCs are aligning around the district charge. That charge being figure out what kids need to know. But there are varying levels and degrees of development and site-based understanding of the standards and the impact on instruction. So I don't think that's surprising to us. We understand that collaboration is important to the work that we're doing. And we've got over 80 sites, and they're just at different places in their learning, development, and implementation. And there are some recommendations that go along with that. The consideration of what's tight versus loose in PLCs. Consider using technology to enhance collaboration throughout the district, to explore outcomes of cross-school PLC collaboration. You've heard us talk about vertical articulation, and the fact that we have our areas in K-12 formats moving into next year is an indication of attempting to stretch that collaboration across groups of schools a little bit differently than we have in the past, and consider whether the PLC model can be expanded to school leaders. And I'll mention it now, but also as we get into the book study that we've done, Dr. Conley has shared a more elaborate structure of teaming in regards to our leadership teams, meaning the executive team, the cabinet, the leadership team. Moving into this next year, we're going to have community engagement teams, an operation team, a master planning team, an instructional leadership team. So those are an effort to target this notion of how do we broaden the reach of PLC's collaboration among differing groups of leaders and learners in our district. So Andy, do we have part of this presentation? There it is. It just magically appeared. So last summer we conducted as a leadership team a book study, and the book study was on that last slide. They're called Every School, Every Team, Every Classroom, and it's about working in collaborative teams. And we distributed the responsibility of this book study to members of cabinet, and then we discussed it in our leadership team. We summarized it in the following slides, and today we're going to summarize the summary for you. All right? So, Andy, if we can move to the next slide there. The first group of narrative here is about traditional school versus collaborative school structure. And my summary, I did chapter 1, talking about the traditional school. We often focus on things that are beyond our control. School funding, what neighborhood a student lives in, do they have a structure, a family structure, support of parents, what kind of knowledge do they have coming in, and all of those things are important, but they're all out of our control. And the traditional model focuses more on that, versus the collaborative school structure says, how do we care, encourage, nurture? How do we create a guaranteed viable curriculum, which is about the work we've done this past year with standards and what students need to know, using research-based strategies. You'll know that we're going into more of the assessment conversation this coming year about how do we know if students have learned what we're teaching them, and then how we're going to act if they do or don't learn the standards being taught. And another component of a collaborative school structure is providing additional time and support, and then celebrating the fact that our youngsters are achieving at different levels than maybe where they started with us at the beginning of the instructional time. At the bottom of this page, leaders matter. District leaders matter, and school leaders matter. District leadership matters because we set expectations, we model behaviors, we monitor, and we allocate resources to our schools. I referred to this a little bit earlier. The development of the district collaborative teams is an effort to take district leadership to a different level and support our schools in a variety of ways. As in regards to principals, the book says principals matter a lot. And they matter a lot because they set the tone for professional learning, teaching and learning in their schools. We've worked diligently side by side with our principals for standards training, assessment training coming in this new year. We've identified a principal coach as well as K through 12 areas to develop support and work and learning with our principals who matter a lot. And collaborative teams, it's all about people, not programs. It does require us to, and several of you used this earlier in the year, the relentless pressure gracefully applied. We want to encourage and challenge change that results in great learning and great teaching. And part of this expectation is that the work's not optional, that this working together as a team in a collaborative, positive, team-structured environment is required if we're going to make great strides in learning with our students. And maybe lastly, I think we were given 2 slides, but I can't say things in just 2 slides, so I have a 3rd slide. And it's about professional teaching matters. So you kind of see the trend. District leadership matters, principals matter a lot, and really good teaching matters. And we want to move from a focus of teaching, although teaching matters, we want to focus on learning. How do we know that our youngsters are meeting the standard of excellence, their greatest potential, and that's a real balance. We want to support our teachers in learning to deliver excellent teaching, which will result in high levels of student learning. And lastly, I would say the last bullet, leaders must acquire the knowledge and skills, be driven to reach levels of learning they want for their own children, take bold and courageous steps, push past the first attempt, push past the negative adult behavior and deficit thinking. And I think that's important. Too often we see the hurdles in what we do instead of the great opportunities in what we do. And as leaders, we need to help push people past the deficit thinking and not allow this work to be optional and touch on the emotions of the people that we lead to garner a shared commitment to great levels of student learning. So that's the summary of Chapter 1, and maybe a little bit longer than maybe Andy had anticipated, but I will pass it off to Chapter 2.
I ask a question really quick. Could you go back just one page before this last page right there? Yes, where it says at the very bottom, second to last bullet, highly effective top-down leadership results in bottom-up ownership. Okay, could you expand on that just a little bit?
I think a perfect example of that is development of collaborative teams. For instance, it may be, let's say that I attack our K-12 feeder patterns, and the tight expectation of that is that there is going to be work in vertical articulation that is going to help our principals, our teachers have a shared responsibility over all the grade levels. So the initiating of the K-12 articulation is really a top-down expectation, but the work being done in the articulation is owned by the people that are at our schools, leading our schools, teaching in our classrooms. That would be one example of it. I think another example as we move into next year would be the collaborative teams, as I shared with you a little bit earlier, that if we have teams, an operations team, a community engagement team, a resources team, a communications team, that those may be expectations that we're delivering about the work that needs to be done, but it's the people in the teams that will be taking ownership of the work that's accomplished by that team. So those are, I think, 2 examples of the marriage of top-down, bottom-up, and how they meet.
And one of the, sorry about that, go ahead.
I was going to say, I appreciate that explanation. I think that helps a lot.
And Pete, I want to go to the bullet that's right before the one that President Minor pushed on, that school improvement initiatives must be simultaneously top-down and bottom-up leadership. We've got schools that have nailed this bullet point, and some of the most effective schools in the district, no matter where they are in the district, are where that balance is really evident, with principals who are the leaders of their school but know that they are supporting the learning, the instruction, the social emotional learning that's going on in that school. But they are ready to step aside and listen to ideas from those that are working with kids in their classrooms, and are welcoming those ideas, and then can collaborate and synthesize plans then for their schools. In other words, these are folks that trust their teachers and then support them to make the dreams happen. So those plans become a reality for the benefit of that school. And I think if we're talking about no cookie cutter schools in the Mesa Public School District, that we have got to foster a school climate that reflects the kids in that school, then these 2 bullet points to me were were extremely important, but that I've got examples in my head. I got pop-ups in my head of schools where I've seen this happening, and those principals and those teams, I think, can be models for others that may be struggling. But we've got them, and we've got highly effective collaboration going on. And I'm this is right here because I was convincing a young mom that she needs to bring her kids back to Mesa Public Schools yesterday. And this is what I hit upon. And she was impressed because she had been a Mesa Public School kid and said, that's not the Mesa Public Schools I remember. And so
Hutchinson, I think you summarized the work that those two things that they do beautifully. It's not just a principal telling people how to do their work. It's not just teachers saying this is how we're going to do the work. It's that relationship of, hey, what do you think about this? How do we make that better? Who do we put on that task to really make it come alive? What are some additional thoughts? What do the parents have to say about it? And it's that beautiful blend of all the voices that get you to a pretty magical spot in a school where there's great leadership on both ends of the spectrum.
And that's the excitement about strategic planning. It's it's high level. What are our goals? It's aligning those resources. And I want to do a shout out for, I see Dr. Eastless in the back and Dr. Forless, and we had an incredible 4 days of learning and some of the best learning. And I also see Michelle Hamilton and Frank in the back, that we had some amazing professional development that was inclusive to our leaders, and it was taught by our leaders. So it was really phenomenal. All right.
All right. So another part of this is articulating a moral purpose. And so it's not, I think we'd be hard pressed to find anybody within our organization that would say that it's not important for kids to learn at high levels. I think every teacher I've ever talked to has said, absolutely, students need to learn at high levels. The challenge becomes, how do you make that happen? And why is it important? So it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to have your actions be congruent with wanting students to achieve at high levels. And there's a part that the governing board plays in this as well, in being aware of what the data says about, and you as a board have done a really good job with that. What does it say about suspensions? What does AZ merit data say? And asking us for that data and then diving into it, because it's important for you as a governing board to understand the why behind the importance of making sure that students learn at high levels. And we can't wait until everybody gets on board. We can't go teacher by teacher. Do you believe this? And are you committed? And are you going to do this? We have to move forward as if everybody is on board. And then as we get the ball rolling, bring those people who are not on board. Because if we wait until every single person is on board and committed and knows what it looks like for students to achieve at high levels, we'll be behind the 8 ball on that. So we need to start, and we need to start now. And having a vision and a mission is not about words on a piece of paper that you slap on the wall. It's about understanding what those words are, being committed to them, and having your actions match the words on that piece of paper. And it needs to be embedded into our day-to-day work. So when principals talk with teachers about professional learning communities and what that looks like, it's not go do a professional learning community. It's let's come together, let's talk about students, let's look at data, let's talk about how, what we can celebrate, let's talk about what we can tweak. And it's people doing the work, not talking about the work. Because if they're talking about the work, it becomes a cliche. We do PLCs. We have a mission. We have a vision. It's not what we have, it's who we are and what we do that then makes it reality for our students. And then another part of that is that goal setting needs to be meaningful. Everyone needs to understand what the goal is, needs to understand how to reach that goal, and needs support along the way to make sure that the goals are being met. And we can't forget to celebrate. And sometimes it's just little wins, but we cannot forget to celebrate, because that's what keeps the momentum going, so that people want to continue to be involved and they have buy-in, because they're seeing the success and they're being celebrated along the way. Students, staff members alike, being celebrated along the way. And something that's really key here is, for some people, they might look at this as, oh gosh, one more thing I have to do, or this is so different. And so one way to look at that is to not focus on what's different, but focus on what's the same, and just maybe tweaking how that's done. So looking at student achievement isn't new. Planning for student learning isn't new. Teachers coming together and talking isn't new. It's just under a different framework. So talking about, what do you already know? What do you already do well? Let's take that, let's have that be our foundation, and let's springboard into our professional learning communities. Any questions?
So in Chapter 3, we move toward communication and building shared knowledge about the PLC model. And you're going to see that the theme from Chapter 1 to Chapter 2, now to 3, is very consistent. It's about the leadership having deep understanding, as well as everybody, rank and file, having that same understanding. And it's a two-way model. Has to start at the top, including the governing board, but it can also have seeds of greatness happening in classrooms everywhere, and you have to look for and celebrate those. So one of the things that we have done as a cabinet this year, which really spoke to that, was we would spend roughly one cabinet meeting a month at a school, where we would go in and look for what was happening in the question 1 about what do our students need to know. And we looked at that so that we could see the seeds of greatness that were happening within individual classrooms for individual students, as well as that more global look of what were we doing as leaders to support what was happening in the classroom. And I think that tie to leading by seeing was very important to ensuring that we were following this model. Having you look at this book study and having you be a participant in it was just as important to that. So now we have much more common framework to work around that we can go out and continue to focus on. Celebration comes up again, over and over again, that you need to celebrate those small wins. The second part of my chapter talked more about the communication side of things, and this is certainly one of the main focus that I will have going forward, and that is formalizing our communications about the wins that we see, about the successes that we see, because you can't keep the light under the basket, right? You've got to make sure that everybody else is seeing what's happening in those classrooms and they can replicate and improve upon those things. So that's my objective this year, is to ensure that as we see this growth in the PLC model, that we spread the good word, have shared knowledge of it, and therefore can also see an increased example of it being sustained throughout the district.
I was Chapter 4, which is aligning policies, practices, and procedures with the learning mission, and the learning mission being keeping students at the center of all of our work and all of our decision making. And so it was really talking about how our structures and our cultures and our culture need to come together, and so paying close attention to that common thread that connects us across the district with our many, many schools. So modeling and protecting the focus on learning, that our meetings and our professional development are meaningful and they have an impact, and really focusing on what would this look like if we really meant it. I think often we have mantras and we say them, but really believing and focusing on the meaning of our culture. Ensuring a tight framework. I think a great example is the graphic that Pete created of what year by year, what was going to be the framework for goals for all of our principals in their PLCs and their learning on MTSS. What is going to be tight? Again, I think that having clear communication, consistent communication is a real important key. And that ensuring that principals have a clear line of communication in getting their learning priorities met. And you want to go to the next one? The next slide. I think the key lessons from the book were pacing yourself. It's easy to want to do everything at once. I know personally in my first year, pacing myself was a difficult task, but the book just reminds us that we have to pace ourselves and those that are working alongside of us. To institutionalize the core purpose through strong communication, keeping it simple and specific so that the message is understood district-wide, from talking about from the bottom up to the top. Moving from hope to certainty. I think we often, I hope this works, I hope that this plan is going to be effective, and that the stronger your commitment and communication is, that you move away from that hope to a certainty that this is going to be accomplished by the team. And then constantly monitoring and adjusting, getting feedback from principals and teachers and teams, and monitoring those expectations and adjusting when necessary.
So I am preparing. I didn't know if I had to do the Pete version, which was a dissertation, or the normal version, which is concise and to the point. So I had two versions of my presentation, depending.
Go ahead and make the correction.
So Chapter 5 dealt with leading collaborative teams, and one of the big takeaways from this is it started off talking about teachers and collaborative teams, but one of our findings talked about how can we expand it for principal leaders, creating those collaborative teams. So I kind of shifted mine to doing it for principals. So when we look at the principalship, especially in elementary, the quote that we have there is kind of indicative of where we need to get to. And we have great opportunities because to build upon, because we have regional teams and vertical articulations teams as well, to create a systematic process for building collaborative teams of school administrators. This is happening across our district already with the Westwood 5, who did it organically. But as we as district leadership to look at doing this district-wide, we have to create the environment for principals to have that, to be able to talk to one another from if you're at Taft to if you're at Pomeroy and have those conversations, because we don't get that. Normally you get it with your region, but you really need to be able to intermix with others. And so that was one of my big takeaways from this. One of the things that it said is that defining the work and ensuring that principals were organized in collaborative teams and consistently communicate the purpose of each team is to improve student achievement. So one of the big things is if we're here for students, we have to look at our data and say, hey, how can we get better? And there's some pockets. Ms. Hutchinson was saying it, like there's schools that do really good. We have to replicate and see if we can replicate what they're doing, those practices across the district, especially if the schools are similar in demographics and strength. The next slide.
Sorry, I was so mesmerized by your conciseness.
One of the things they talk really about is really having a focus of when principals are meeting. And so the key is that principal learning teams must always approach a problem or issue by first building shared knowledge. And I think we did that this year with tackling that all our principals understand the standards. So having a shared knowledge. Then studying the best that is known in about the particular topic. So whether we're looking at mathematics and the mathematics crisis that we had in the district 3 or 4 years ago, to reading the 90%, looking at a particular focus and saying, making decisions that are best for students in their learning, not what's best for us. So we have to, as leaders, be able to have those critical conversations and look what's really best for the learning of all students, not just our particular group.
If I can highlight in my evaluation this evening, I'll be sharing with you the formal district plans and being able to organize the activities and into the team. So I'm really excited to be able to share that with you as well.
Then I just shared, I was fortunate in my principalship that I worked with other principals from across the country in Austin and Gilbert and Vail that were facing similar problems with my demographics. And we were able to look at and talk about different perspectives. So how they do things in Austin was totally different than what we do in Arizona. One, because Texas gives a lot of money to schools. So they had a lot more resources, but in that they had systems that they created. And so what I did is I looked at their systems and said, how can we replicate it? And then we created it there, and we created a math academy based off of that, just literally looking at systems that they did, and students got to flourish because they got the opportunity. It was really looking at, for us at the time, we had the School of the North, what we call Summit, where a lot of our parents were saying, hey, we're not going to our neighborhood school, we want to go to that school. And we had to convince them that we could provide them the education so when their students left, they could go to any school. And that was our math academy. And we took students that weren't in the gifted and talented program, they were just regular students, and gave them the opportunity, and they flourished. And so having that opportunity to be able to dialogue and connect with different principals gives you that opportunity to share a problem. We had a math problem, how can we do that? That's kind of what the collaboration and teams, leading teams is. So I did that in like 4 minutes, Pete. So I'm done with my section.
So chapter 6, ensuring a focus on student learning, to build on what James said. So, and with our finding is about, okay, how do we do it then? As district leaders, what should we be doing? And these 6 ideas here are things that we can do to make it better for our principals and for our teachers. Things like addressing the schedule. Have we looked at it and we've challenged them to take a look at their bell schedules and when they teach certain subjects to make a difference? Can we bring best practice to them so they don't have to go out and search for it all the time? Can we be bringing in speakers? Can we be bringing in trainers to help them? Things like encouraging reflection, our BOY, MOY, and EOY meetings this year, beginning, middle, and end of the year, asking principals to reflect on their practice and on their scores and how their year went, I think is something that district leaders can do and to help them build their capacity in this area of collaboration. And then obviously monitoring and adjusting interventions and enrichment. The part that sticks out in this chapter to me, it talks about if our fundamental purpose is to make sure that all students learn at a high level, then we have to make that our focus. If that's our purpose, then we have to spend our time doing that. And that really speaks directly to the finding and to question 1, what do we want our students to know? And how do we know they know it? Those 2 items are in this chapter really, really heavy. And if we don't spend our time as leaders and school leaders, teachers, and district leaders and governing board asking these questions, we will never improve that fundamental purpose that we have about making sure all students learn at a high level. So our role is to make sure that our collaborative teams are working. So with the next slide, this is the idea of what our collaborative team should be doing. And we've talked about this so many times during the year. I'm sure you're very familiar with it, but what do we want them to know and how will we know they know it? The idea that this chapter helps to reinforce is this should be what they spend their time doing. Teachers don't have to reinvent the wheel and don't have to do it alone. It's about coming together and talking about their data, the standards that exist, and bringing together those resources. The high-level thinking that teachers can do when they come together in a group will make all the difference for our students. And this graphic kind of just lays that out, question 1 and 2 for us. What do we want them to know, and how will we know they know it? And then, of course, we have to get to the point where we're providing supports or enrichment depending on what students need.
Chapter 7 is Ms. Williams shared, a professional learning community focuses on learning, not just student learning, but Chapter 7 takes us into adult learning. So what does that mean? A question that is commonly asked as we think about continuous improvement is, if the adults don't get it, how can we expect the students to get it? So we have to allocate our resources and time to ensure that our teachers, as Holly talked about, a master schedule, a schedule where students have ample time to learn the standards, but also where our teachers have ample time to collaborate during their school day so that they have an opportunity to further their work together. When we think about adult learning, We need to continually ask ourselves, are the kids learning more as a result of what the adults are learning on that particular campus? And that's the frame that I'll ask you to hang on to as we talk a little bit more about Chapter 7. In this, I created just a chart that compares when we focus on adult learning, we do less of the green, we do more of the green and less of the yellow. So I'll talk you through a couple of these. When we think about authentic learning for adults that really perpetuates and makes an impact on student learning, we're asking teachers to do the real tasks of the real work within their school. So collaborative designing of instructional units, taking a look at writing assessments together, working in collaborative settings. For many, many years, the individual teacher has been the unit of change. But when we can change that to a collaborative teams of teachers being the unit of change for a 4th grade, we are going to see far more impressive results in terms of how kids' confidence builds, their growth towards their knowledge of the standards, as well as their persistence and leverage of those standards year over year. We know that the best adult learning is done during the school day, and that it is designed around what teams need to know. How do we work together as a team? How do we reflect together as a team? How can we build upon the strengths of one another to get closer to our student learning goals? We also need to know, I'm going to take you one back. For many years, professional learning is something that is invitational, and it's generally an event. So when we ask teachers, how do you like the learning? And they'll generally say, oh my gosh, I had to go to a training that had nothing to do with what I teach, has nothing to do with the kids that I teach. It doesn't match what my kids need at all. So we typically would say those are formal trainings that's generally mass training, couple of hours, and it's done. When we talk about the adult learning that makes a difference is collaborative teams of teachers working together on the daily business of their work. And oftentimes we ask teachers if they would call that professional learning, and they say no. They think that you have to go somewhere, sign in, and get a certificate for that to be professional learning. And so we really need to make that shift. As we continue to think about celebrating the very best practices that are happening, we know that we have to celebrate those small wins. So when teams of teachers see a win within the students that they are serving, we celebrate the team, and that helps to build collaboration versus competition. The next slide is the job of district leadership. So this is something that I think about all the time. The role of a district leadership team is to support principal learning. That's our number one job. And in order to do that, we need to make sure that our principals are working within collaborative teams so they can share, as James and Erlinda and Holly have talked about, some of the current structures that we have around how can principals come together, build that vulnerability to be able to say, I think I'm stuck. How can I get better alongside of you? And we have to continue to focus on results. And sometimes that means that we have to confront something that this chapter speaks quite a bit about, is the expectations versus acceptance gap. We can set an expectation, and then sometimes we say, okay, but we're just gonna accept this. Really, our job as leaders is to go back and to coach and to give feedback to train up people so that they can get to that level of expectations that our kids deserve. And that really requires specific and meaningful feedback. Here's an example from White River School District of what that might look like in terms of consistent messaging across their district. And you'll see on this slide the two big ideas that they've put their arms around to say, this is what is our fundamental purpose. As Holly said, it's our reason for being, it is our why. And if the district, the job is to ensure high levels of learning for all of our kids. As a result, they've organized themselves into collaborative teams to work and learn together to achieve that particular purpose, and there are no exceptions to that. Kids deserve it. On to Dr. McNeil.
All right, I'll bring us home. Chapter 8. Now that we've done all this fabulous work and we've had all these great conversations, we would be remiss if we did not assess how we did. It is important to remember that assessment or data or information is more than student information or testing results, but of course it probably is our number one indicator. It's important that as we strive for our 2023 goals, that we do have a formative assessment plan of not only student information, data, but all student information data, discipline, attendance, as well as testing results. For us to do this, we started this year. We dipped our toe into the pool, if you will, on the year of Focus on Learning, knowing that Focus on Results is coming. We know that it needs to be collaborative. We need to have all stakeholders that have a voice. We know that everybody needs to be present and everybody is invested. It's important that along this journey, as we assess how we're doing, it needs to be both formative and summative. This is always a healthy conversation with teachers, principals, district leaders, the difference between formative and summative. Formative is basically just telling us along the way, kind of a dipstick, if you will, of how we're doing and how do we monitor and how do we change things. The summative is the end game. Did we reach it or not? We need to make sure that our snapshot is accurate and a mirror of our current reality. Therefore, our data needs to be clean. And in order for our data to be clean, we need to make sure that we have processes and structures and frameworks in place so that expectations are clear and they are tight across the organization. We need to always clearly communicate, as Helen mentioned earlier, what our expectations are. Next, we can move down to analyze student learning. This is super huge. We need to shift as an organization. We need to be courageous enough to challenge ourselves to go away from how do you like what we're doing rather to are more students learning? That is a different question. In all things that we're doing, if it's the MTSS model, if it's best first instruction, if it's creating a 5-year assessment plan, or even changing the benchmark testing calendar, which we did for next year, we need to make sure that we're asking that question, and that is our guiding beacon, if you will. We need to shift from data informing to what does the data mean? Many times in cabinet this year, we did a learning protocol of I see, I wonder. And we would look at benchmark data, or we look at AZ merit scores, and we would see trends. We would see things, and we would wonder what were the reasons. We need to do that from top to bottom across the organization. Like I mentioned earlier, we need to be courageous to bring the data to the table, all data, both qualitative, the stories that we hear, because perception is reality, as well as the quantitative, the hard numbers. And of course, once we have the information, we have to have action to get it done. Data needs to drive decision making. We need to always be thinking about next steps. We need to be clarifying our goals. We need to be restructuring them if need be. We need to analyze our day-to-day operations, from our budgets to our learning to whatever we're doing, to make sure that we're staying true to what we believe. And of course, lastly, celebrate, 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 which I heard, I believe, our Linda talk about the small wins along the way. We need to make sure that we are assessing, and we're real with our outcomes, but we're making sure that we're celebrating all the great things that happen day in and day out.
Awesome. You know, in light of time, how long is the video? I don't recall.
It's about 6.5 minutes.
Okay. Board, would you like to see it? You want to be able to view it on your own? Yes? No. It's totally up to you. It's ready to be queued.
I'd like to see, because I'd really like to talk about finding 2.
Let's do it. So discussion around what you just saw. Marcy?
We really need, I love the idea of authentic engagement, because learning then is student-driven, and then students own their scholarship. And I think that's what we found lacking when the principal is shadowing the student. She realized that that's not necessarily what's happening. And I know at Red Mountain High School, I switched schedules with a kid, Jake Fossen. He was my student aide, and I switched schedules with him. And it was a real eye-opening experience. No person should have to sit that long for a whole day, and think that we're going to teach something. So I also like the idea of soft skills, because I think that really hits the social emotional learning that we're going for. People skills, social skills, character building, social intelligence. That's got to be there before I think we hit academic achievement. So I don't know. I've been listening to you all, and I'm very inspired. Now I'm taking the book to Florida with me on Father's Day. I figure I have 5 hours on a plane one way and 5 hours on the plane the other way, and I'll get that book read. But I'm pulling away with the 5 C's of the Mesa Public School District: communication, collaboration, commitment, celebration, with a sprinkle of courage. Why not? 5 C's of Arizona CS. I was that history teacher, you know. So I'm looking at these 5 C's, and I'm like, this is us. And we got work to do, but boy, we're identifying what we need to be doing, and we're ready to work hard to make it happen.
Guys, any board members?
There's a lot. You just talked about a lot of things, and I wrote down a few items, but I think what I get from this, among many other things, is it really is a district, we're building a district-wide, from top down and bottom up support system, where the teachers are supported by their principals, and the principals feel supported by their teachers also, because principals are learning from their teachers. For a while, our principals have not known as much as our teachers. It's just the way it is. And this is allowing our principals to gain the knowledge they need so that they can support their teachers, and the teachers can look to them as instructional leaders. Our cabinet has become, if not yet, is going to become instructional leaders, the experts that our principals can come to and gain the insight leadership that they need, the skills that they need to do what they would like to do in their own schools. So that's what I have gotten from this book, among other things, is we're working, and I know we've said it over and over, collaboration, but that's how I break it down. It is a support system, and hopefully in that support system, the relationships will also be built, relationships of trust and caring for one another, because we're all on the same page trying to accomplish the same thing.
Any others? Because we're going to definitely be doing lots of talking on the 25th.
Well, I think we'd be remiss if we just talked about classrooms, and we're forgetting the support staff who, without the environment isn't there, the food isn't there, the lights aren't on, the air conditioning doesn't work, and the waste baskets didn't get tossed out the night before. And I'm hoping that when we talk about collaboration and communication and our commitment, that I've been talking to bus riders. I rode on with the bus drivers, and man, they do a lot of this already too. And we can't forget our classified, there's a C, our classified staff members who create the environment to make this all possible. We can get so focused on learning, but the learning has to be in an environment that's supported by wonderful people in operations, and the grounds crews, and the food and nutrition people, and our bus drivers who get the kids there.
We had an incredible day with our directors of classified on Wednesday. Maybe it was Thursday, I'm not sure, Thursday. But talking about how do we support them in their work to support the staff that they lead, and how incredibly important it is, because just what you said, without them, our schools wouldn't be up and running. And about the bus drivers?
Well, Member Hutchins, I would say that everywhere I've ever seen PLCs implemented, it's always been a challenge to include the classified as part of the conversation. And I think that we are embarking on some new territory here at Mesa, trying to do that and do that well. I'll use an example. The meeting that we had, all of the classified directors that we're exposed to those PLC concepts, right? And I had a great conversation with our director of custodial, because sometimes the EduSpeak just kind of goes over even my head. Sometimes I'm like, okay, let's break this down. Let's stop. Take the 4 questions, right? And let's not think of them necessarily as applying to students for a moment. Let's think about lifelong learners and your custodians. What's the first thing you do when you hire a custodian? You train them, right? Okay, so what do they need to know? Okay? What's the next thing you do once you train them? You have a supervisor go out and see if they're doing it right. So let's say they're stripping down a floor. Supervisor goes out and checks to see if they do it right. Yep. That translates? Okay, I got it. So that's the next step. What's the next question? What do you do if they don't do it right? Well, we retrain them, right? And then the best part of the conversation is we ended with the thing that particularly for my directors, and I think in the classified world we get so pragmatic and heads down getting the work done, we forget that last question. What do we do when they get it right? And so it's not so much about necessarily that collective commitment in the classroom, but it's that collective commitment as an organization, and how can we translate the very good things that we're doing for kids really to our own staff, because at the end of the day, even as adults, we're learners, and I don't know anybody that doesn't appreciate a little praise at the end of the day, right? So we had a really good conversation around what can we do a little better to making sure that our supervisor, not just saying what you did wrong, but we say what we did right. We do a little bit of that now with We Care when we provide some incentives to our staff, but it's got to be more than that. It can't just be that one event. And so it's trying to build the whole culture around this conversation and extend it all the way out to the classified staff, because I'm as passionate as you are about saying those folks need to be part of this. The bus drivers need to be a part of this because they can make or break a day for a kid. We all know it. But they have tough jobs too, and they have bad days too. So there's tools that we give teachers to de-escalate a child. We should be giving tools to a bus driver to de-escalate a situation on a bus so that it doesn't get out of control or creates more stress for them, which is what it does, right, if a kid's out of control. So I think we're moving in the great direction to do that. Are we there yet? Have we figured it out all? No. But just having the conversation is a great start.
I think one of the things for me is I think about the overall strategic plan. I know that Elaine mentioned she's on a committee. I know it said there was 2 board members. Who's the other board member who participates in strategic planning?
Clerk Sears had been a part of that, and then just because of her busy schedule, it looks like that we'll be asking one of you to be able to do that.
So far you haven't been able to engage in those things? I think one of the things that's been frustrating to me, and if I understand some frustrations, is you look at Pete's graph about how it's rolling out, and for me, one of my frustrations, and it relates to these findings, is so we know what these kids need to know, we teach it to them, and if they don't get it, we teach it to them again and again and again in the exact same way. You're struggling, we're going to have you come to summer school. Guess how that goes over with my 11-year-old? We've never put him in summer school because it's not effective during the year. The last thing he wants to do is go to more. So I feel like the frustrating part is figuring out what we do when they don't know it, and providing. I'm really excited. I want to leapfrog ahead of year 1 and 2, because I want to know what these multi-tiered levels of support are. I want to know how we're helping these kids who are sitting, like, I can't remember his name, Ramon, who did she shadow all day, and they're bored to tears in a 2-hour math class because they aren't getting it the first time, because it's about the way we're presenting that information. And I think that until we can move to there, then some of this starts to feel a little bit like, okay, get us to the stuff that's going to help us go forward. And so I appreciate the groundwork that's being laid, and I'm really anxious for the strategies that are going to come.
I think that will also address the social emotional a lot, because when kids are bored and feeling like you said, they get it over and over, nothing's different, they still can't get it, and they're sitting in those classes hour after hour, day after day, that's got to have an impact on their...
Year after year, they figure out some coping strategies that aren't moving them forward. You know what I mean? They've just learned how to either sit by the smart kid or figure out how to, like, they're just figuring out how to survive, and they're not learning or enjoying it. And I think that's the saddest part to me at all, and of everything. And so I'm excited for this, but I'm at the end of the first year, I still feel like we're spinning our wheels in the same spot. So I'm anxious for the next part. So good. I love the chart. Thank you. Even though I feel like half of our kids will be graduated before to the fifth year.
You know, Jenny, you make such a good point. I think we're all wanting that to be tomorrow, like as in August, whenever the first day of school is. And at the same time, there's some pushback because we're going too fast. So it's a tough balance, but you bring up such a good point that we will have more discussion about. Any other comments? This was very informative. Thank you. Anything else? Stephen, you're quiet. Is there anything?
I like the deer in the headlights.
We love you.
I guess my mind works where I need to see it to understand it. And so I guess I'm kind of like the, be able to go out and watch a model, or watch it at a classroom, see it happening, and then I can begin to fathom and comprehend it. I guess that's kind of where I'm at. I'm excited about having a direction, having a focus, having a desire, not just being complacent with where we're at, but the comprehension of where we're going. I admit I'm still a deer in the headlights.
You're waiting for the doing.
Yep.
Like Arlen just said.
I think that's a really honest answer. I think to some degree we all feel like that. This was like the fire hose method of getting information, and certainly we got a little bit while we were getting all of it, but yes. So that was a very good, honest, I think we all, maybe not Marcy, I don't know. Marcy seems to absorb things, but I think we all, yeah, and Jenny probably, I don't know. But it was a lot of information, and we are anxious to get down to the details more as it goes on. Okay, with that, we can move on. Is that okay? Is there any other comments before we do? Kiana, you also have been quiet. Budget update then.
I am going to hand it over to our Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Scott Thompson. We are really excited about where we are right now with the budget and some news that we'll be able to share with you publicly. And our Chief Financial Officer,
As I say, I'm just going to turn it over to Mr. O'Brien. So thank you, Ned.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Conley, Mr. Thompson. I think I will start off like I always do. This is a living, breathing document. It will change, but I think we're a little bit more. It did change, and it will probably change again, definitely. But we're in good shape. So we have had the governor sign the budget. So we got a lot more information in and got some more numbers and stuff. So. Although I will say that this will still change, because if we've talked, our ADM changes all the way through the end of June. We know a lot of the figures are a lot closer. Just to kind of update you, we ran all the numbers based off our end of May ADM, and with the governor's budget and a few items that were in there and getting to know all the numbers, we have some additional revenue. Along with, we have our ADM that keeps going up through the months, either because we're making changes from prior items that might have been incorrect, we're getting some kids maybe online, just various reasons. So our ADM is up from the last time I was here, and then we do now know the governor's budget. So we increased some revenue in the M&O budget. Also, towards the end of the legislative session, the governor increased the reduction of the reduction. I think for one more year, I might not have to say that anymore, of district additional assistance or capital. So we actually got a kind of a double portion of that. So that got us more money in capital, which I know a few of the cabinet members up here will appreciate.
Well, and I'm going to correct you, Mr. O'Brien, just because in
It's 2
honor
years.
of our representative here, yeah, I think it was our legislator who actually adopted twice the amount. So
Fair enough.
we appreciate all of them working together to get education
Push
more
ahead.
funded.
Yes, thank you. And so with the additional revenue, I believe the cabinet had a discussion and Dr. Conley. And so as we've talked, we had the 26 teaching positions that we hired early on and didn't hold. With the additional revenue, we're going to add 13 more certified teaching positions that I believe Dr. Holmes has already been allowed to start working on. So I'm not taking any of your thunder, Dr. Conley, but
It's not mine, it's ours. We have impact in the classroom.
But that's always good to hear. Getting more teachers into the classroom is really important to us. So that is the biggest change on this sheet that you'll see, other than the additional revenue that I stated, both in the M&O side and down below on the capital side. We'll have more capital dollars to be able to do with. So I can ask any specific questions. This is probably the last board meeting, unless otherwise requested, that you'll see this summary. The budget forms are now out, and so at our next board meeting, we will have the proposed budget, which will be through the budget forms, and then 2 weeks after that, we'll have the adopted budget, and then we'll be ready to go.
Up on the red section,
Mhm.
says the DAA transfer of 4.5 million.
Mhm.
Don't normally say numbers that large. 4.5 million. Currently, we've got, but so now we're, like a couple of years ago, that took all of our DAA fund, that transfer. But now we will have 21 million, so we are borrowing we are taking a portion of it and allocating it toward M&O things, but the rest of it could go toward
Capital needs.
Textbook adoptions, those kinds of needs.
Desks.
So that leaves us 15 million. Is that correct for that? Or, because that's where I don't see I guess I see it up here, but then I don't see it come down here.
So
Am I lost?
no, down at the bottom, the capital revenue.
In the green.
Yes. So that 9.6 is reflective of the double payment, essentially. Not quite double, but almost. Remembering that number is an estimated number because it actually isn't known until October or November, so it could change by a couple $1,000s. We usually get it pretty close. Our department does really good, so it won't change that much. And then down below in the red, you see the 4.5, which is what we are taking out from capital and moving over to M&O, and that was done this year to help pay for the some classified raises. And then since the override didn't pass, we're doing it again. We do it again next year to be able to support those raises that we gave this year.
Correct. And what about the increase again in classified, in Prop 206, that's in here too?
Yeah, if you go up about middle of the page on the
Yeah.
right-hand side, the $5.7 million.
So there's the 4.5,
Yes.
and then there's gonna be another 5, and that's that same 4.5 from above?
Yes, that's where it
It's
reflects,
added
yes.
there, and it takes back out, and then we're gonna need another 5.7?
To continue on with the plan of classified raises, yes.
And 2.
Yes.
Also want to highlight, we almost forgot, we are restoring the.
I was going to go there next.
Oh, okay. I'm always stealing your
So
thunder.
where does the 5.7 come from?
The
It's
5.7.
gonna add to the 4.5.
Yeah, that is collectively gotten from last board meeting. We went over some of the
I watched.
expense reductions
Yeah.
that we did,
Yes.
so that we did some
I got
budget
that. I've got
tightening and
that.
some belt tightening.
That's
and-
where it's coming from,
And that's
is-
where it's coming from.
Because
yeah.
it says other funds one time.
Yes.
And some
Right.
of those funds, some of those budget tightening things looked like they were recurring.
They are all recurring with the exception of the budget adjustment, which
Right.
is based on current year difference between what we budgeted for teacher salaries and what we actually expended this year on teacher salaries.
So right now, we anticipate about an $8 million
Savings.
And we're
next
gonna
year.
use 5.7 of that to help cover classified raises.
Exactly. And only 2.2 of that is one time. It's a factor that we will look at every year as we go through the budget. It could be, in a future year, it could be negative. This year it happens to be a positive. So it's not recurring in the total amount, but the concept will reoccur in the budget year after year.
And as Mr. Thompson was about to mention, sticking with the capital side, if you look from previous summaries to this one, the 9.276 number, so the 9.2 million, that is reflective because we did get that extra money from the state. That if you remember 2 years ago, we reduced all capital budgets by 30% so that we could extend our capital out more years. With that money, we have restored that 30% to all sites and capitals, so they will be back 100% funded of their budgets from 2 years ago. So we took the reduction out because we're getting more district additional assistance in capital.
So in
That's down in the capital expense section.
Yeah, it's the
under green?
It's the
Okay.
9.2 million.
Okay.
It increased over what we had because we had been just continuing on with the 30% reduction to make sure we get our capitals as stretched as long as we can. But with this quicker restoration, we're able to give that 30% back to schools and departments.
So, Mr. O'Brien, what did line C say the last time? Do you have that number available? So it wasn't 9.2, was it about 6 million?
You're going to put me right on the spot, and
I can pull it up. Just give me once. Nope, that's a fair question.
I believe it was right about 8. I believe it was right about 8.1. But that is off just real quick off the top of my head.
I think
Okay, I was off by just a little bit.
So close, we'll give it to you. From
Yes.
the meeting last time, it says 8.4 million.
8.4, that's
Okay.
correct.
Yep. Yeah, that's about right, because it's about $800,000. So.
My question then, if I understand it correctly, is that we've, at the end of 1920, the school year 2019 and 2020, we'd have almost 17 million left in the capital fund. First of all, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, if we spend all of our budget and do all that, yes, there'll be approximately just under 17 million left, yes.
So that's an increase. So in essence, this year we're bringing in 20 and we're spending 13. 4.5 million of that is going to cover M&O needs.
Yes.
Is there, knowing that funding has been permanently restored, well, as permanent as things get, is there a need to, or a desire, or is it appropriate then to increase that capital spending for some of the deficits we've been not funding for as long as I've been on the board?
So very good question, Member Peterson. We are having a conversation around multiple areas. There is furniture replacement in the classroom. There are potential adoptions or educational material needs. We just learned about this additional funds. We'll be coming back to you with additional conversation about that, but we can't say, literally until just a few weeks ago, we didn't know we were getting it. So we can't say to you today, we know exactly how we're going to spend it, but I know there's a lot of things queued up ready for it, and we're going to have a conversation about what that priority is. The plus side of DAA is it doesn't go away. So whether we spend it by July 30th of next year or take it into the next year, that money stays with us as a district. So that's a plus.
I guess I'm not speaking for me personally, I would prefer us spend the money versus carrying it over as a.
I think that's the intention.
fund.
Yes, agree.
So at least that's my perspective on it versus just sitting on it.
Well, and won't some of where we decide to use it come out of the master planning? So we'll say these are the needs we've identified.
So we might spend $4 million on just school furniture. But there's also a lot of education materials. You guys know very well that there are lacking educational materials throughout our schools, and we need a plan to address that. One of the challenges that we're really faced with this good news is that the district's been starved in capital for so long. where do you start? We have so many priorities in front of us. We could literally spend all the money just on classroom furniture tomorrow and still have a huge need out there. We could spend it on vans that transport students. We could spend it on textbook materials or textbooks themselves or online materials possibly. All of that comes out of this fund. So all of that has been on hold for a very long time. So that is the conversation. In no way do I intend to say that we intend to carry forward. I'm just saying that if we don't spend it all, we get to keep it. But we're just in the, again, we just got the information and we don't have a clear 100% plan presented to you this evening. But I know that we'll be having this conversation in the near future.
My point for bringing it up is just I would support looking at that.
I agree. I fully understand that and appreciate that. Thank you.
Have a timeline on when you're going to start looking at that?
We are looking at it right now. So I think you'll see something shortly, but it's summertime, so we just need to get the budget
Principals
proposed
will come
and
in to
adopted.
talk about how they want to spend it, but yeah.
Well, they're getting
They're
their
here,
30.
but
They're getting 30% back, so they're going to have
we're
some
thrilled.
flexibility
Well,
in
and
their
it
own
helps
control.
offset some of the other places we've cut to cover some M&O needs.
Exactly. It's apples and oranges, but it maybe helps a little bit with, yes, I can do some things over here that I haven't been able to do. So yes.
You sound a little bit like my husband when he comes to me and says, "We got this bonus, dear." And then he says, "But the bad news is," kind of deflated
Have a
us.
roof, or we can have.
Yeah. Thank you.
I was also excited to hear and read from the you covered in the last meeting how much was restored to the school facilities board, so that some of the things that we've been having to spend our own bond dollars for will now be appropriately covered by the state, which is a huge
Thank you, Member
benefit to
Richardson,
us.
for bringing that up. We currently have almost $12 million in projects with the SFB right now. Our staff has been very focused on submitting appropriate work. You're seeing that get approved. I'll remind everybody that, in fact, it's in progress right now. Skyline is receiving $5 million worth of roof repairs from the Arizona School Facilities Board, and the money that the legislature provided in that much needed area. The facilities throughout, we are not the only district, so the facilities throughout the state have been starved for over a decade, and unfortunately the cost is coming due as many of these buildings were all repaired back in 2000 under the original School Facilities Board, where they spent $2 billion to fix all the schools, and then we didn't fund anything for another 2 decades, and guess what happens in about 20 years when you fix something? It starts to fall apart again. So here we are, but very pleased that we've been very successful in continuing to submit appropriate grants to the SFB and be successful in getting those granted. And we're pleased that there's the additional dollars, because that's going to help everybody get more projects done.
Pass on our thanks to the state legislature. Tell them this is a really fabulous
Good budget.
problem to have, that, we're excited for this difficult decision to make. Yeah, thank you.
This is a good night for you to be here. Okay, are we done with the budget? Scott and Danny? That's great. Thank you for that information.
Thank you.
Compensation. Dr. Holmes.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the board, we are recommending, based on the budget, we are recommending increases to compensation for each of our 4 employee groups. I will briefly summarize. No mystery to any of us, as we've talked about this significantly over the past few months, but we are going to recommend a 5% increase to those in the MEA, or our teacher group. We are going to recommend in the classified world that we increase pay by $1 an hour for our classified folks, except for those in the transportation department who hold a CDL. We're going to recommend that their pay increase be $1.50. And I do believe that we have established the why and the need for that with the severe shortage that we have in bus drivers. In the world of our classified supervisors and administrators, we are recommending a 2.5% increase to their salaries. And then I would also add, as you can see in the compensation memo, we're also recommending that we adjust hourly rates and base salaries for the various positions throughout all 4 groups. This one? Yeah, yes, thank you, Dr. Lester. So there's one also that I'll call out and add. There was some discussion in Meet and Confer about the placement of BCBAs and OTs and PTs who currently are placed at the base salary for a teacher. And the discussion that we had indicated that that's really not an appropriate placement for those positions. The work and training that they go through and their level of expertise is much closer to that of a psychologist, and so we're recommending that they be moved to the psychologist schedule, or at the same base rate as a psychologist.
Response to that? You've been able to, or is this still information they don't know about?
The OTs and PTs, have you formally?
I haven't, but out of Meet and Confer, I mean, certainly their team has shared with them, but we haven't shared officially.
And we have received some feedback, so I haven't communicated with them directly on this, but it's a small
we
group.
haven't voted on it, that it's not something.
It's not official. Yeah, correct. Okay.
We've talked a lot about how before the minimum wage increase in Prop 206, we had less than a certain percentage of our employees making within $1 of minimum wage. So will we're raising everyone $1 an hour, and then in January,
Everything goes up $1.
everybody goes up $1 again, right? So
We are holding steady.
We're treading water. We're not
We're
making
treading-
it-
yes.
We're not making progress.
we're not making progress on getting more of our employees making better than minimum
No,
wage.
if we want to fully correct the problem, we'll need another
5%
$12
override?
million.
We need an additional 5% override to fully correct that program. Interesting.
Correct. Thank you.
Good to talk about.
Yeah, so, but to put that in perspective, I want to say 2 years ago, the cost of the raise for classified employees was about $1 million. And between this year and our recommendation, our last year and our recommendation this year, we're adding $10+ million. So I would say we're making a significant effort to correct the problem, but I wouldn't. We have ways to go.
Kind of like we're underwater and we're breathing through a straw.
A little bit. A little bit.
We'd like to get our head above water, and that'll happen in November, we hope.
Dr. Holmes, can I ask a question on substitute pay, please? There's been some concern that some teachers have brought to my attention.
Sure.
And they're worried about, they're not worried about the pay, they figure that's fine, but they're worried about the loss of site-based subs. Subs that are affiliated with a certain building that teachers can always depend on when they're doing professional development or they're going to conferences or whatever, that they can get those site-based subs. Are there still going to be site-based subs under this type of compensation arrangement?
Is there, I believe she might be referring to the subcadre.
It is. It's under the Title II funding that was cut. So the subcadre was funded under the Title II funding. And if you recall, that came from the federal budget of monies being decreased in Title II but increased in Title IV.
I will share with you that is a small number. I think there were 19, 20? 21. So 21 total subs. So it's like 1 per 4 schools. So it's actually not that many people.
So you're telling me then the impact will be negligible?
Yes, correct.
That that teachers will still be able to depend on the subs that fit their school best.
When we're up and running, we should have a sub pool that's 700-800 substitutes.
Okay. Question, this is a procedural question here. I know we need to have, as an action item, the budget increase information pamphlet agreeing that that's acceptable. Is that true? Also, we need to vote on the compensation package?
We are asking you to vote on the compensation package as outlined in the memo. I probably would also like to highlight, once again, we're looking to raise base salary for teachers, which I think is always important, given that we are in a teacher shortage. So we're moving that from $41,850, recommending to $43,450.
When you say base salary, Dr. Holmes, does all first-year new teachers start at that base salary, or are there different criteria that determine what that is?
Yeah, we have multiple criteria. So years of service so there's you have your base salary, then you have years of service, and we pay at $500 per year of service, and then we also pay $65 per credit up to 60 credits beyond their degree. So that's another way that their starting pay may come up. But theoretically, a teacher coming straight out of college with no experience or additional credits would be at the base salary.
What's the base salary again?
If you approve it, it will be $43,450.
First started this, we were able to bring it up to $38,500, so we've been able to move it considerably since then. So
it was $38,500 when I came here.
Well, then I will ask for a motion on approving the compensation package.
I'd like to move the approval of the 2019-2020 Employee Compensation Plan.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, then we'll move on to the budget increase information packet.
So I believe we have the draft final for your preview. We've had some incredible input.
Do any of you have any questions or concerns about the pamphlet as it looks now? Are we ready to make a motion? Okay. I hear a motion.
Make a motion to approve the final budget increase information pamphlet.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, very good. We are now going to go, okay, here we go, procedural. We need to recess to go, we don't do it at all. We're just gonna go into executive session. And I would say let's take a 5-minute break. Let's kind of stretch our legs, all of the things we need to do for the next 5 minutes, and meet into the room, in the other room where we used to meet for
North Conference Room.
Thank you to all those who are leaving us. Have a fun
guys get
couple
to
of
go
weeks.
home.